is my home! Yay!
This is Brooke Wilberger, a young, vibrant freshman with her whole life ahead of her. She was energetic, optimistic, and full of purpose. On May 24th, 2004, what began as an ordinary morning quietly turned into the beginning of a nightmare. That morning, Brooke stepped outside her apartment complex to clean the outdoor light posts. She set her flip-flops beside a bucket of soapy water and got to work. Then, without warning, she vanished. There were no witnesses, no clear signs of what had happened. Only a disturbing silence that settled over what had always been a peaceful residential community. When police arrived, it didn't take long for them to understand one thing clearly. Brooke had not left on her own. There had been a faint scream. A strange vehicle reported nearby.
We don't have a suspect. We don't have any clear leads.
We just wanted her back. We just wanted her still. I think that it was important to us to have her, just to get her back.
We felt very much an integral part of the case. Any tip that came in, they immediately let us know.
And slowly, an entire community began to sink into fear. What happened to Brooke Wilberger? And who turned that quiet morning into the start of a nightmare that would last for years? Let's take a closer look at the life of this young woman. Brooke Wilberger was 19 years old, living in Oregon. She was an excellent student and showed great promise in athletics. She loved basketball, snowboarding, and running. As a child, Brooke struggled with speech and did not begin talking until she was 4 years old. Her family never forgot that, not because it defined her, but because of everything that came after. Brooke grew into someone quietly determined, soft-spoken, but never passive. Someone who observed carefully. Someone who spoke up when something didn't feel right. She was the fifth of 6 children, raised in a large, close-knit family. She pushed herself both physically and academically, drawn to challenges that required discipline and focus. When it came time for college, Brooke chose Brigham Young University in Utah. Part of that decision was practical. BYU offered one of the strongest speech pathology programs in the country. Brooke wanted to help others overcome the same struggles she once faced. She wanted to give people confidence in their own voices. Her first year of college went smoothly. She adapted. She found her rhythm. And like many students, when summer arrived, she returned home to find work and gain a little independence before the next semester. Her sister, Stephanie, helped Brooke secure a summer job at Oak Park Apartments in Corvallis, about 30 miles from their parents' home. Stephanie lived there and managed the complex with her husband. It was an ideal arrangement, a light summer job that allowed Brooke to earn money while maintaining an active social life. Brooke planned to stay with Stephanie for a few days at a time while working, then spend time with friends and family. May 24th, 2004. It was the beginning of the work week, a warm Monday morning in Corvallis, Oregon. Stephanie and Brooke had plans to have lunch together that afternoon, between Brooke's work shifts. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, Stephanie looked out the window and saw Brooke filling a bucket with water, preparing to clean the outdoor lights. A few hours later, while Stephanie was preparing lunch for her children and her sister, she noticed the time. It was past 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Brooke was late. Stephanie later said she called to her kids jokingly, "All right, let's form a search team." She walked through the apartment buildings, assuming Brooke might be chatting with a resident or had lost track of time that made her uneasy. The bucket Brooke had prepared along with the cleaning supplies was still sitting beside a lamppost. When Stephanie stepped closer, she noticed Brooke's flip-flops were there too. The straps between the toes were torn, the soles were smeared with mud. Stephanie said it looked as though Brooke had been pulled out of them while trying to stand her ground. 911, what is your emergency? Yes, we're trying to find a missing person. Last seen. Around 10:30, from the moment officers arrived, they sensed this was not a typical missing person case. Adults can disappear for many reasons. Most cases begin with waiting hours, sometimes an entire day, but the details at Oak Park Apartments did not allow for that patience. Lieutenant Ron Noble later explained.
911, what's your emergency?
Yeah, I've got someone who's missing, a worker friend that we can't seem to find.
Missing from where?
I'm the manager of the Oak Park Apartments, and this worker actually happens to be my sister-in-law. She's 19.
When was the last time anybody saw her?
Around 10:30.
Someone who had changed her mind and walked away. Police began canvassing the entire complex. Officers went door to door, repeatedly asking the same questions. Had anyone seen Brooke? Had anyone noticed anything unusual? Had anyone heard anything? A few residents mentioned a scream. At a time anyone questioned it, Brooke was already gone. As word spread, the atmosphere shifted. Neighbors grew uneasy. Parents watched their children more closely. Students changed their routines. A once quiet apartment complex became a place filled with unanswered questions. Investigators widened their focus. They reviewed known offenders in the area, hundreds of names. Each one had to be checked. Time-consuming, inexact, but necessary. They also looked beyond Oak Park. Reports began surfacing of a dark-colored minivan seen near Oregon State University around the time Brooke disappeared. A vehicle approaching young women. A driver asking questions. Incidents that might have seemed harmless on their own, but together formed a pattern no one had recognized soon enough. Search efforts expanded. Volunteers joined law enforcement. Flyers appeared everywhere. Tips poured in. Some led nowhere. Others sparked hope, only to collapse under scrutiny. Days passed, then weeks. And with each passing moment, one truth became harder to avoid. What happened to Brooke Wilberger was not an accident. It was not a misunderstanding, and it was not something that would resolve itself with time. As days turned into weeks, the search entered a new reality.
The investigation had kind of gotten to a point where they were still plugging away, following up on tips, still talking to people, still turning over rocks, still searching, and we were at that point just hoping for something to break.
Volunteers remained. Flyers stayed up. Calls continued to come in from across Oregon and beyond. People reported sightings. People hoped they were helping. Every lead had to be checked, especially when it led nowhere. Investigators pursued every possible lead. The
investigation had kind of gotten to a point where they were still plugging away, following up on tips, still talking to people, still turning over rocks, still searching, and we were at that point just hoping for something to break.
Interviewed residents, expanded the search area, carefully reviewed reports of a dark green minivan seen near the university. They tracked a man who had drawn attention for unrelated but disturbing criminal behavior, searched his home, reviewed his movements, and looked for anything that might explain what had happened that morning. But nothing connected him to Brooke. One by one, the early theories collapsed. The man was ruled out. Reported sightings could not be confirmed. The search widened, then narrowed, then widened again. Each passing day brought less certainty than the one before. A month went by. For Brooke's family,
when you start making steps to entering other buildings and dormitories and going and stealing other people's property, being in the underwear, that's a progression, and ultimately abducting somebody.
Time was measured differently. Mornings arrived without answers. Nights ended without resolution. Her absence settled in, heavy and immovable. Statistically, investigators knew what prolonged disappearances often meant. Quietly, they began preparing for conclusions no one wanted to say out loud. But there was still no body, no crime scene beyond the apartment complex, no direct evidence explaining what had happened after Brooke stepped away from the lamppost. A few days later, investigators received a tip about a man named Sunku Kim, and he quickly became a person of interest. Kim was a 30-year-old recluse with degrees in genetics and cell biology.
It's more than just a checklist. Either someone is planning a very heinous mutilation, sexual assault crime, and murder, or it's a fantasy. But either way, it's extremely important to us in our investigation and very startling.
Lived with his parents in this house, about 80 miles from Corvallis, in a suburb of Portland. In the weeks before Brooke disappeared, he had spent most of his time online trading stocks. Kim came under scrutiny after he was caught stealing women's underwear.
Public knows he's not related to disappearance girl. Everybody knows.
From multiple college dormitories and charged with burglary. One of those dorms was located at Oregon State University, just a short distance from the Oak Park apartments. A search of Kim's home uncovered thousands of pairs of women's underwear. Investigators believed that behavior like this could easily escalate. Just before sunrise, nearly a week after Brooke vanished, police raided Kim's home. On his computer, they found 40,000 pornographic images and 4,000 videos, many depicting rape, torture, and dismemberment. They also discovered a file labeled osu.doc, short for Oregon State University. The file had been created after Brooke disappeared and was deeply disturbing. It functioned as a guide on how to commit a sexually motivated crime and evade capture, including what to wear and what to bring. However, nothing directly linked Kim to Brooke. Despite how alarming the evidence was, Kim was ultimately ruled out when computer data, phone records, and receipts showed he had been at home and shopping with his father at the time Brooke disappeared. Kim later served 7 years in prison for multiple unrelated offenses, including burglary. His parents also filed a lawsuit against authorities over the way police raided their home that morning, claiming the action was excessive and traumatic. The case was settled for more than $300,000. In Brooke's case, days turned into weeks, and soon nearly a month had passed with no answers. And with each passing day, statistically, the likelihood of finding Brooke alive continued to decline. Investigators still had one lingering lead: a vehicle. Police were searching for information about a dark green minivan, possibly a 1997 model. They also asked a man named Brian to come forward, after he had previously called 911 to report that same vehicle driving dangerously. Detectives received multiple reports of a similar minivan circling the Oregon State University area on the very day Brooke disappeared. A university employee named Bob reported seeing a
Yeah, we're sitting at the light, and the girl comes running across the street, and my daughter in the front seat says that she doesn't have any clothes on. I told her, get in the car, lock the door, that I wouldn't let anybody hurt her, and no one helped her, because we pulled around there, and my daughter got out of the car and met her at the door and brought her over to the car. That's when she said, he's got a knife, he's trying to kill me.
Van with Minnesota license plates in a parking lot. He observed the driver speaking with a female student, who later appeared frightened enough to report the encounter to university staff. Another female student said the van had stopped directly in front of her, and the man inside asked for directions. She immediately walked away when she saw him step out of the vehicle and open the rear door. These were promising leads, but there was still a long road ahead to identifying the man behind the wheel and determining whether he was truly connected to Brooke's disappearance. Then, 6 agonizing months passed with no progress. Search teams slowly disbanded. Life, for most people, moved on. Then, far from Oregon, something else happened. In the final
She described the car seats down to the details. She described the tinted windows. She described the fact the car was two-door, that it was red.
week of November 2004, nearly 1,400 miles away, in the state of New Mexico, the break investigators had been praying for finally came. In Albuquerque, a waitress named Dara Finks
It was gutsy as hell. And I think she's the hero. Dara is the hero of that night.
was driving her SUV down the street with her 3 daughters just after dusk when they saw a young woman. What happened next came from Dara's own account. She said the young woman was clearly in distress, frantically trying to get help from someone inside a restaurant across the street. Dara,
He spoke Spanish.
she had been abducted but had managed to escape. She was blonde, blue-eyed, and on her neck was a
I called out to him as Joe. I said, Joe. And he acknowledged me. And as he got closer, this your vehicle? He said, yes. I had him turn around and I placed him in custody. I found a glass pipe used to smoke crack cocaine and a small knife.
wound she said had been left by her kidnapper's knife. Inside the vehicle, she had been sexually assaulted. Then her abductor stopped at a nearby apartment complex, tied her up using her own shoelaces, and went inside. Incredibly, the woman managed to free herself. She left the shoelaces behind in the parking lot and ran into the street with no clothes on, where Dara Finks rescued her. But while the victim was now safe, her attacker was still at large. The young woman provided police with an astonishingly detailed description of the man and of his vehicle. She also remembered one small but critical detail: a small red stuffed animal hanging in the side window of the car. At that point, Albuquerque police officer Ed Taylor was among those searching for the suspect, a white male with a shaved head, wearing a baseball cap. Police also gathered information from a woman living in the apartment complex where the victim had escaped. She said the man's name was Joe, and that he spoke Spanish. Based on those details, police located the vehicle within hours. Inside it was Joel Patrick Courtney. He was arrested just a few blocks from where the victim had escaped. He was already known to law enforcement, a convicted sex offender with a history of violence, a pattern that stretched across years.
We knew that if we were going to prove that Joel Courtney was responsible for this, the best chance we had was to find evidence of Brooke being in the van.
And across state lines. Joel Courtney was 38 years old. He lived in the Albuquerque suburb of Rio Rancho, in this home with his wife and 3 young children. He had worked as a mechanic and a fisherman, and had lived all over the United States, fluent in
They told me that you're not going to believe what we found. And I said, well, what is that? They said, we found Joel Courtney's DNA in the van. And I said, well, that's good, but that doesn't quite get us there. And they said, we also found Brooke Wilberger's DNA in the carpet in the van.
As an ever-smiling, attentive father had a dark side. 6 months earlier, his wife...
It was the nature of the DNA evidence which told an even bigger story. The DNA evidence was in the form of bodily fluids which were commingled. That told us a story in terms of what had occurred in that van.
Had taken out a restraining order against him, reporting that he had choked her. As detectives in New Mexico built their case, one investigator began to notice something else: the similarities to an unresolved disappearance in Oregon. A 19-year-old college student, taken in broad daylight, no witnesses, no body. A dark-colored minivan reported near the scene. When Oregon authorities were contacted, the overlap became impossible to ignore.
Have no respect for this court. You're the rudest person I've ever met.
I do believe, sir, that you are again attempting to delay this matter, as you had repeatedly.
I would spit in your face if I was close enough.
We now know police believe Brooke was murdered, and police believe a man currently sitting in an Albuquerque jail was the one who killed her.
Records showed that Courtney had been in Oregon at the time Brooke Wilberger disappeared. His movements placed him near Corvallis that day, and the vehicle he was driving then matched what witnesses had described months earlier. The vehicle was seized. Forensic teams dismantled it piece by piece. Surfaces were swabbed. Fibers were collected. Everything was logged, tested, and then tested again. The process took months. For Brooke's family, the waiting was unbearable. Then the results came back. Brooke's DNA was found inside the vehicle. Her hair was discovered among Courtney's belongings. The evidence confirmed what investigators had feared but could not prove for nearly a year. Brooke Wilberger had not disappeared on her own. She had been abducted, and the man responsible was already behind bars. In the summer of 2005, a grand jury in Oregon returned a sweeping indictment. Courtney was charged with multiple offenses, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, rape, and sexual abuse. The state announced its intent to seek the death penalty, but there was still one thing no indictment could provide. Brooke's body had not been found, and until that happened, the truth remained incomplete. Joel Patrick Courtney was already behind bars when Oregon began preparing its case. In New Mexico, he faced charges related to the abduction and sexual assault of the woman who survived. He ultimately pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. From his cell, Courtney denied any involvement in Brooke Wilberger's disappearance. He claimed he had never met her, that he had never even heard her name. In Oregon, prosecutors moved forward regardless. In 2005, a grand jury indicted Courtney on 19 counts, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, rape, sexual abuse, and sodomy. Under Oregon law, aggravated murder carried the possibility of the death penalty, but extradition could not happen immediately. Courtney first had to serve his sentence in New Mexico. Years passed. In January of 2007, Courtney attempted to avoid trial altogether, claiming he was mentally incompetent. The court rejected the claim. He was found fit to stand trial. The case continued slowly, deliberately under intense public scrutiny. By 2010, 5 years had passed since Brooke vanished. Prosecutors faced a painful reality. Without Brooke's body, a trial would be long, uncertain, and devastating for her family. Courtney knew this, and he used it. From prison, he made it clear that he knew where Brooke's remains were hidden. He refused to say more unless the state agreed to his terms: no death penalty, and a guarantee that he could complete his existing sentence in New Mexico before being transferred to Oregon. After months of negotiation, the state agreed. Courtney changed his plea to guilty. In exchange,
not much has been disclosed in the Wilberger case about where the crime actually took place. Authorities say it happened in the woods in Benton County in Coastal Range. And for the people who live in that area, they say they can't believe something like this could have happened in their backyard.
He led investigators to Brooke Wilberger. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There would be no release, No second chance. No future beyond prison walls. But justice in this case came at a cost. It came years too late, and it came only after a man who had taken a life decided the truth was useful to him. More than 5 years after Brooke Wilberger disappeared, the search finally ended. Guided by Joel Patrick Courtney, investigators traveled west of Corvallis to a wooded area in Benton County, about 12 miles from where Brooke had been abducted. Her remains were found on private property, concealed beneath a fallen tree. Time and exposure had taken much, but not everything. Dental records confirmed her identity, and so did a small detail her mother recognized immediately. The silver watch Brooke had received as a Christmas gift was still with her. For Brooke's family, the discovery brought an ending they had waited years for, but not the one they had hoped for. There was no relief, no sense of closure, only the knowledge that she had been found, and that she could finally be brought home. In court, Courtney admitted what he had done. He acknowledged that on the day Brooke vanished, he had been driving through the area looking for a young woman.